Irish Times Bestselling Author who today, on the 1st of August 2021, is launching her fourth novel titled The Lake House at Lenashee. She joins singer, broadcaster and author Miriam O'Gara on Writer's Block. Well, hello, everybody, and you are most welcome yet again to Writer's Block with Miriam. And today I have an Irish Times best-selling author with me today. She is from the publishing house called Poolbeg in Ireland, and I'm absolutely delighted to have Sheila Forsey on the show today. Sheila, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I really am. Thank you.
Well, what a roller coaster few years you've had. Tell us how you began as a writer. What drew you to it?
I was born in a village that was full of theatre, and I got involved in the theatre at quite a young age, and it began a love of words. But my father was quite a storyteller and kind of known very well for his storytelling, and so I don't feel I was the first writer in my family. I may have been the first to put it to words or to put it down on paper, but I came from a family of storytellers. I didn't pursue it for many, many years. And it wasn't until I had, I suppose, a slight crisis in my life, as in I was at a crossroads at a career, and I had ran a business for many years, and I was going to kind of go into theatre or maybe into teaching drama to kids or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this is about 8-9 years ago. And I discovered a course at the same time about creative writing.
Yes.
And I wrote to the drama school, and they said it was such a beautiful letter. They hadn't received such a beautiful letter of application before, had I ever considered writing. So I said,
"Oh my goodness, that's a very unusual comment, isn't it?"
Yeah. So this it kind of really made me think about it then, and I said, right. I had closed up my business, and I said, right, I'm going to really pursue this, and I'm going to give it a go. It was in the back of my mind, like so many people, I think, for years and years and years and years. And I just said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it a go. And luckily, my husband kind of said, okay, come on, you're always talking about it. And he bought me a pink laptop, and I started.
Oh, that's
kind of how I started.
Well, that's wonderful to have had that support. How many authors only wish they had that support? Isn't that wonderful?
And you know what? And it was hard because I had a business, and that was gone. And I was like, all of a sudden, this person with this mother with 3 children, and I was a struggling artist wanting to be a novelist. So I was very lucky that way that I had the support there, because it is tough. It is a tough road.
Oh, it's a very tough road. Now, today, this interview is being broadcast on the 1st of August, and that's a very important date, because a wonderful novel that you have just published today is The Lake House at Lenashee. And look, you've got your books. They arrived very quickly today.
Indeed. Yes, they have literally arrived. So it's lovely to see it in the physical form. And I'm really appreciative of the publishing house for publishing it, because it has, again, been difficult times. But I'm so excited, and I wrote this book during, it started at the beginning of COVID, so I feel it's very special. The characters are almost like I feel I know them really, really well, and they're very close to my heart, and I think I'll never forget writing this book because of that time as well.
Yeah, I can see that very much, and I've just finished reading the book, and folks, for those of you listening, this is the most wonderfully layered book. You're going to have to stick with it, because it not only goes into intricacies of plot and character, but what I loved about the book is that you go so many other places too. You bring in Dickie Rock, you bring in Joe Dolan, you bring in Gay Byrne, you bring in all the people and the things and the music and the popular culture of that period of mid to late 60s.
Yes.
And you've got Brown Thomas, and you've
Yeah.
got the politics and the social network, and you've got all the different, because the modeling community, modeling community, without giving too much away, is part of the core story here.
It
You
is.
bring in all these different famous figures, you know.
And it was so enjoyable to do the research on it, you know, because it's set in 1967, and I kind of had to pick an exact time for my own head. So I picked when Jackie Kennedy arrives over. She's widowed now, obviously, and she arrives back over to Ireland with her children, and that was the time I kind of set the book for 1967. And you know, she's so glamorous, and she's just, you know, I mean, who else could you pick, like, to be at the style icon of the time? And the characters, I suppose, in the book are very influential in society. So obviously one of them is, you know, has her photograph taken with Jacqueline Kennedy, and that kind of kicks it off for me in my own head, that's where this is where these people are in society. They're having dinner with the Kennedys. You know, they are from Dublin, and they're Dublin political high society people, and so
and then you've got the next tier down of women characters who feature right the way through. I mean, to the end of the book, of course, without giving anything away.
Yes.
They are extremely important, but they wouldn't be from that strata of society, and yet you're bringing out something that we don't often see in novels that are often attractive to American audiences. What they don't tend to do is highlight the fact that the average woman aspired to be glamorous, that they were very much into fashion. They were very much into French cuisine, and they were reading and following these stories, wishing that they could get to that place. My mother would have been one of those, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, even Edna O'Brien, I suppose, had brought her book out, The Country Girls, in 1960. And, you know, I think she unleashed, you know, there is another world out here. You know, there is the swinging 60s, but Ireland was far from the swinging 60s in rural Ireland. I mean, there still was so much oppression, but there was these girls trying to break through, I think, and these young women knowing there is another life out there, and they really wanted to kind of, you know, but I think if you're born into this very small rural countryside where one of the main characters is, and she becomes a cook for these socialites, maybe that's a bad word to call them, but you know, and her friend as well, you know, they do know there is another world out there, and they want to get to that other world. So you know, I think influenced, I'd have to say, by The Country Girls as well, and that whole story of the oppression of Ireland, and that there is another world for these girls to explore and try to get there.
Just before we come back to the lake house at Lenashee, can I take you back to Kilbride House?
Mm-hmm.
Because this seems to have been a real breakthrough novel for you.
Yeah. It was, yeah. And I go back to my father again. He used to do these recitations, and I'm the youngest of a very large generation. And there was a recitation called The Papish and the Prod. And it was a really beautiful story about this Protestant and a Catholic, and they meeting, and of course the families fighting in Ireland in, I presume it was, I can never find out who wrote it because it always says anonymous, probably written in the 40s. And I heard it so many times, you know, kind of, you know, in the pub with my father and everything else, that it stayed with me. And I really feel it was the basis of that story. You know, this Protestant and the Catholic, because I think I actually had an aunt who was married to a Protestant, so I kind of had, and that was a lovely story, but I knew there was a lot of other stories that did not end up like that, you know, and there was a lot of fighting and a lot of difficulty, and I had kind of heard it firsthand because I had so many relatives And so they were really able to tell me, and down through the years I'd heard so many stories. So that's where the basis of that story
So do
came
you have
from.
both denominations running through your family?
No, my aunt like is a Catholic, but she married a Protestant, and we were extremely close to them. So I would have heard all the stories, you know, of what
Yes.
happened before and what it was like. I was born in 1970, but so these were like 30 years before that, and you know, a lot of them just had to, you know, run away to get married, and that was kind of, you know,
Yes.
often what happened, or they went to England and then they
Yes.
came home married, and there was very little anyone could do about it at that stage.
Yes.
So I suppose that was the story I had in my head, definitely that instigated Kilbride House. And I'm fascinated with houses and old houses. And
what was the prompt specifically to take that story and have that as your debut novel? What was the, you know, like, was there something that happened apart from, you know, sometimes we can have these stories we know about in our lives, but then there's something that actually says, right, okay, this is the one I'm running with now.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's, I suppose, a few things, and without trying to give anything away in that, I also, where I live is close to the town of Enniscorthy.
Yes.
And in the town of Enniscorthy, there is this most unusual building, and it's called, it's closed now, but it was originally a psychiatric hospital. And it was known as, originally when it was built, as the lunatic asylum. And it's this absolutely massive, overpowering red building that kind of overlooks the town. And there used to be legends that it was actually meant to be an Indian palace, and the maps got mixed up, and it was built in Enniscorthy, and then it was meant to be a prison in some other foreign country. And again, the drawings got mixed up, and it was built in Ireland in the late 1800s. And I remember going and walking around there when it was closed, and I felt haunted by the place, is the only word. And as a child, I remember nearly being afraid of this big building. And then when it was closed, I went and I walked around, and I knew it was going to be part of the story for me. So again, without giving too much away, but so that definitely had an influence. And I suppose, you know, even though I didn't really particularly was going to write a romance or anything, and I the romantic part is part of the story, but for anyone who has been to the Blasket Islands and Dingle and down there, like, it is like it's just magical, and it's so wild, and it's so mystical, and it's like the edge of the earth. Like it's like if you were looking for somewhere magical but mystical and haunting, that is the place for me. I mean, and even on a rainy, stormy day, it's nearly better because you're blown away. Like, and I remember being down there, and I have a tendency, I don't know what I believe really, but I do nearly believe that the voices of the past are there, and if they were real down there. I felt the history was just there. It was there.
We come to the next novel now, The Secret of Evelyn House. What an incredible story this was too. Now, this is actually published pretty recently.
I know, yeah.
You've had a lot of work on in the last...
I know, yeah. This was published at it was released the day of the first lockdown in Ireland. The very first day of the first lockdown.
Oh,
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. And so literally the boxes, I'd say, were even opened. Yeah, so that
now, how different was that experience? I mean, because you've had a major work published out of pandemic, you know, and lockdown, and now suddenly this what were the differences from an author's point of view, from a publishing perspective? What changed?
Right. Oh gosh, everything really. I mean, so much changed. I remember we had all these plans. I was going up to the airport because a lot of my publisher, you know, would sell a lot of books at the airport, and you know, the shops at the airport and stuff like that. So we had plans that I was going to be up there signing books, and in different, we would do a little tour of the different places in Dublin and whatever, book launches organized, different little events organized, and there was this talk of a lockdown at the time, but it just didn't seem like, sure, like, it's not going to be that bad, or we didn't even know what a lockdown was, but there was rumors of things happening. Yes. And then it was just like, bang, it was just, the book was published, it was in boxes, literally, the shopkeepers couldn't even open the boxes because they were gone home as well.
Yes, and this is it, exactly.
Yeah, but like, I have to say, the writing community are brilliant, and we did a launch on Twitter that night, and it trended. I remember, the Secret Everline House trended, and that was lovely. And sure, I was just like,
and how do you feel this has, like, right, 16, 17 months on now?
Yeah.
I suppose all of us have got used to the situation, and I wonder, to what extent have the publishers stepped up to the plate?
Yeah, well, I suppose, again, it's been very difficult for publishers, but it's also opened up that online is so important, and online, even for the local bookshop, that the person locally can buy the book online from the local bookshop, rather than having to go to a huge big website. So I suppose it has opened up avenues like that, and so on a positive note, there's more focus on online and on ebook and Audible as well. But I think the paperback and will always be king, and the bookshop always will be as well.
Yes.
So I genuinely think publishers are really, they're trying to support us, the authors, and as well as that, to put as much into the bookshops as we always have done, even though things have changed there as well. I mean, there's no book launches or anything anymore,
No, it's all online. And I notice a lot of the authors are really getting behind the small bookshop as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I have local bookshops, and, they've been hugely supportive of me. And without that, I mean, when you start off, you really have to make those relationships, and people are kind, and they're very good, and I've had some great nights, and I'm glad I experienced that. I've had some hoolies, put it that way, after a book launch as well, and they were lovely to have, and hopefully at some stage they'll come back again. And we've really, I mean, with Kilbride House, it was definitely launched, put it that way. It was not, but we're hopefully getting back there again.
I just want to take people for a moment just to your website. Just a question on that one there. Have you found that more people are being driven to your website now? Has it been an automatic knock-on effect?
I'll be honest, no, because I haven't really pushed it at all. And people, I'm not even sure, hardly know I have a website. Saying that, I would be online. I know.
Then you can get the book from there as well.
It actually needs quite a bit of work, I would imagine, my website. I'm saying that I am quite active online, and
yes, you are, and
all
you
the
are
different platforms. So it's kind of another thing I need to get sorted. Really, is my website, but and Poolbeg, of course, have their own website, so the books can be bought directly from the Poolbeg website, as well as obviously from bookshops.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. If you're looking like for, I actually found it difficult to find the author's page on the Poolbeg website, but that immediately drove me to your website, because if I wanted more information on you, you have it there on your website, which is fantastic, really. Just, can I ask you, right, with the second book, did you find it was an easier process? Was this now something you felt you had the blueprint for? You knew where you were going when it came to, had you also made your decision that you were going to go into this type of fiction?
Yeah, well, actually, Miriam, I had originally written a contemporary novel called Mending Lace. It is published as well through Poolbeg, but it wasn't actually as in the traditionally it's published as an ebook, and it could be bought on Amazon. So that would have been my first book, kind of, but I remember I had no contract, basically. That was the first book that I just had written, but I had no contract. I had an agent. I have a lovely agent in America. And I said, what will I do? And she said, Sheila, will you write the book that you really want to write? Because I felt the first book, even though it has a special place in my heart, it was very much a book I felt the publishers might want to buy, or, you know, this might help me to get in there and whatever. And so I said, right. So I had no contract, no nothing. And Kilbride House, the whole idea of it was in my mind.
Yes.
And I just started to write that. And to be honest with you, it actually was, I think when you write historical fiction, there's a lot of research, and a lot of the research with that particular book, and it's kind of through all the books, is the forgotten Irish and those Irish people that went abroad and didn't come back. And I think that idea really helped me. So I started to research a lot about the Irish people who left for all sorts of reasons. You know, they left because, obviously, for financial reasons, but they left for other reasons as well, because of religion, oppression, all sorts of things. And they just had to get out of Ireland and get away to live their lives. But it didn't mean that they didn't love Ireland from afar. And they had this kind of unusual relationship with it, that they couldn't live in it, but they loved it from afar.
Yeah, it does seem that my mother's generation, I would say in particular, so those who were born, let's say 1934 onwards, they seem to really come a cropper. They really had it very hard, because if they stayed, and they managed to make a life for themselves, then wonderful. But for anyone who went away, trying to come home was almost impossible, you know, particularly if you'd gone off to Australia or America. It takes so long to get yourself started, but to come home again would be perceived as failure. You wouldn't be embraced by your family the way you would hope, because, you know, you left.
Yeah.
And how do we know you won't come back again? That's what was said to me. I was away for 18 years and I came home twice. Now, I went in the mid-80s, came home twice, found it practically impossible to get work, because I'd gone away for more than 3 years on each occasion. And if you go away for more than 3 years, it is very difficult to be accepted back into the workplace here.
Right.
So I was thinking of the amount of people who simply went to the UK, even for them, trying to return home after maybe 8 years, 10 years. It's quite a thing, almost as difficult as if they had actually gone to Australia or somewhere like that and were trying to come back, because the mindset was very insular with certain generations.
It so was, you know, and if you were anyway different as well, I think, you know, Ireland could be a very difficult place to live in. And for that reason, a lot left, I think, as well, you know, and there's just so many stories and so many forgotten stories that I think that they definitely become part, for me, of the writing. I think the idea of the character, everything builds around it. I always feel like a witch. I have all these different ingredients. Like I have this idea for a character, I have this idea for you know, where it's going to take place, and all these different, like all sorts of different things, and I throw them all into the pot, I whisk it around, and then I hope something will come out. But sometimes there's no reason of why this is going into the pot and that's going into the pot and that plot and that, you know. So I'm not a planner as such. I just throw it all in, and I've done a lot of research as well for The Secret of Evelyn House, and because it was based on a playwright who wrote a play, and the play was banned in Ireland by the strict censorship law. So that brought me down a whole new road. Oh, what's this? I didn't realize so much stuff. I mean, they literally told us what to read here, you know, unless it was like equestrian or about how wonderful we are at battles. I mean, forget it. Nothing else was being published. So, and again, I suppose I go back to Edna O'Brien, because this was before that, this book is set before that, but, you know, she broke the mold there, you know, because even though her book was published, you know, the Irish people began to find out about it. And, or sorry, even though her book was banned in Ireland and banned and burned, people still began to find out about it.
How have you found the change? Like you're going there, you're dealing with those issues, and of course, you know, there's a theme of mental health going through. We'll come back to your latest book now in a moment. But that theme now is being faced by a lot of people head on. Is this a place? Is this where you want to go with your writing?
Yeah, I suppose I have this strange obsession with different things, and one is houses and the past, and the other I think is definitely the whole how mental illness has been, and I'm just talking really about Ireland, how it's been treated in Ireland over the century, really, you know, over this and the century in the last 100 years, and you know, it's definitely better. I mean, when you look back on how people were treated, it was just frightening. It was just terrible. It was just, I mean, I've read stories that haunt me about what happened to people and why they were locked up, and all sorts of unbelievable reasons. But yet today, of course, there's just so much more going on than you know, I think we can look back and forward with different types of glasses and look back and say it was better back then because they didn't have the issues that we have today. It's just like a completely different world. Like, I talk to my mom, and you know, she I won't tell her, I won't say her age now, but you know, she can tell me about what it was like growing up, and she just tells me it's like a different planet. You know, it's just all so different today. And it's different challenges and different worries, and just because I suppose we have different services and different things, you know, it's I think, not to be negative, but life is hard, you know, and life is hard, and it's really about for me exploring that, really, you know. And I mean, I suppose in this new book, one woman is trying to forget, the other is trying to remember, and neither of them, you know, both of them have had difficult lives, and they're both born in different eras, so maybe that represents a little bit of you know, how challenging it is, really, in the past, but the present as well.
And self-preservation in so many different ways keep coming through. You've got the dementia issue, which of course means a lot to me. Both my parents, my mother had Alzheimer's, but my father, through his cancer, also developed it. So there were so many moments there where, you know, your heart went out to the parent. And you could understand the character of Julia needing to get to the bottom of certain things that they were saying, certain things that could be very easily brushed off. But, excuse me, a little fly has come in here. Certain things that could very easily be brushed off as unimportant because the person is ill. But when they keep coming back to it and keep coming back to it, you do ask questions, and in this case, it opens up a whole chasm of stories and a whole incredible reawakening for a young lady, who is herself a writer, and then she has to face members of her family, and you think that that's going to go down. What I love about what you did is that you took what everybody thought was going to be perhaps a story of intrigue and lust, and something that you could see, oh, it'll either be this, that, or that scenario, and it doesn't go there at all. It ends up being a totally different kind of tragedy, where there has to be an acceptance of certain questions not being answered. And that's real life.
I know every writer is different, and but when I was writing that book, I didn't actually know what was going to happen, and that's the way I write. So I think that if I had have planned it, it probably would have had a different storyline. But
so when you were writing your first novel, you are saying that you did have more of a plan or a target audience.
Yes, I did. I knew exactly what was happening, but now I don't. Now
And do you feel the quality of the writing is very different?
I remember writing Kilbride House, and when I was writing it, I broke down crying because I got so upset. And I think that's when I knew that I had, my writing had changed. You know, I had, like, people say, do you write for this? Do you write for that? I think now I go into I just go into the world of the characters, and I don't think it's about how much time you spend or whatever, but if you can get to that point where you shut the outside world out and you're just there with the characters, and then you're not sure what's going to happen, you're kind of nearly like watching as well what's going to happen. And because I have a kind of I did a lot of drama and stuff in my younger years, and I see things like on a stage more so when I'm writing, so I can kind of see the characters and she going to go there, or oh, maybe there was something behind that door, or you know, so that's, are
you very visual when you're writing?
Yeah, and I think that comes from being like, when I say highly sensitive, I'm one of those people that when I walk into the room, if something has happened, we'll say there's been a row, and somebody else could come with me and say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know, I felt something in the room. There was like something had happened, because I really start to feel what the characters are feeling.
You transfer that to the page with ease. Well, I mean, that's very evident, and your descriptions, I love the richness of color as well. That, you know, and the descriptions of people like Harry, and he could have become a number of different individuals by the way you were describing him, and yet you took him to a different place again. That's really what you seem to find the nooks and the crannies and those gaps in the descriptions that are so stereotypical in lots of other books, but you find another way. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. Nothing was going to be as you thought. Nothing was going to be predictable in this book. So, you know, there were a lot of cast members, and I would just say that to people, you know, when you're reading the book, you do have to keep track a little bit of who's who, but it's really worth it, because what that gives you at the end is so many more options as a writer, so many different places you can take it. And you bring it to a really totally believable conclusion, which is sometimes hard to do when you've got so many characters. And you're jumping in and out of time periods as well. You're jumping from the past to the present to the past again. And you've got to make that make sense.
Yeah, and I think I love that type of book myself. And I remember when I was actually, again, going back to Kilbride House, when I was writing this, I didn't really, I said, I'm going to write this in but then I want somebody in the present, and I really didn't know how to do it. So I just wrote it, and I didn't even know what it was. Like I said, what kind of a book is this? And it was then when I got signed, and I actually asked the publisher, I said, like, what genre is this? And she said, it's historical fiction, but it's a time slip novel. And I didn't even know, though. I didn't even know that that's what it was, you know. So, but again, I think my mind goes like that. It switches. So I don't find that difficult. You know, it's easy for me to see it. I know then I have to put it onto the page, but I think if it was difficult for me to do that, to actually visualize it myself, it's almost like a movie in my head. Oh, that's what was going on back then, but this is what's going on now. So then it's just kind of blending them together. But,
and it reads very visual as well. It's which is wonderful. That's what you need for a complicated story like this. You really need that. Have you gone into the area of screenwriting in your life?
No, but I haven't even gone there at all. But during the COVID, I was very lucky to be part of a new playwriting group. And just as a separate thing, then I just wrote a very short play, and I sent it into Scripps Ireland Festival, and I was delighted to be. I'm a finalist in it, and so that's happening
congratulations!
in August. Yeah, so I'm delighted. So kind of come full circle because I've loved drama all my life. So it's lovely to know there's going to be something with that. But yeah, I definitely do see things in a visual sense. And with the lake house, I actually went to Johnstown Castle in Wexford during the COVID when I was writing that, and that became the inspiration. And they were amazing to me because they allowed me to go into the castle, and it's this absolutely fabulous, hauntingly beautiful place. So even though the book has nothing to do with Johnstown Castle, the inspiration for the actual house. So if you read the book and then you go to Johnstown Castle and you walk around the castle and the grounds, you go, oh, I can see the lake, I can see the library, I can see the different areas, you know, that definitely inspired the whole book. You know, and they're really lovely in there. It's run by the Irish Heritage Trust, and you know where you go in sometimes and they say, oh, don't touch this, don't touch that, or whatever. Like, you know, it wasn't like that at all, and it was taking hundreds of photographs and whatever. So when it did become very visual, because I literally had a very visual place as well to write it from, which was kind of incredible considering we were in the middle of a pandemic. But this was in my home county, so I was allowed to go there, which was great. And
do you find that when you're doing your research that you are writing at the same time? Do you often find that you have to do that, or do you research first and then begin the writing process?
Oh gosh, no, I would write and research at the same time. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but not necessarily either. Something could have happened 20 years ago and I'll have it locked up in here, and that could come into the book, you know. Or something that I've seen years ago or heard or whatever, a little story. So it's a kind of a mixture, but I definitely don't go, right, that's all my research now. I mean, like, especially for the 3 books really, but with the lake house as well, I got quite fascinated with that time period in Ireland, because it was such an unusual time. But you know, John Charles McQuaid is the Archbishop of Dublin, and he's like the King of Ireland, like, and he has so much power in society, in religion, in politics.
Yes, I love the way you bring that in.
Yeah, like you
bring Charlie Haughey in and all these different politicians that we know about.
And it was, you know, De Valera is president. Jack Lynch's Taoiseach. You know, you look at this program, for anyone who's not in Ireland, called Reeling in the Years. I love it because it brings it all to life for you.
Yes.
And you have Charlie Haughey, who was quite famous, very famous man here in Ireland, and he's the Minister for Finance at the time, you know, so you've all these political figures as well, and this Archbishop, and it's just such it's such an oppressive time as well, you know, but it's so interesting when you read it. There was things I had no idea, because maybe I lived in rural Ireland. I wasn't, you know, the city is different to what rural Ireland would have been like. So just to read what it was like in Dublin as well.
Yes.
I did quite a bit of research, even though maybe only some of that really went into the book. So I suppose when I say I do research, only some of that will ever really go into the book, but it gives me a very strong flavour of that time period that I'm in, so that I can literally go into it in my head, you know. Even what's on the telly, Talca Row, I think, was just finishing up on the television, and the Reardons were going to start. And I remember even watching that years ago. So even to listen to the music of that time, and as I said,
super important.
Yeah, because it was the swinging 60s, but Ireland wasn't really swinging. You know, we weren't listening to the Beatles that much or anything like that. A lot of it was, you know, Dickie Rock.
Oh yeah,
you know,
and then Brendan
Boyer.
Yeah, you still had a lot of major, a lot of young people followed the Irish bands, you know, and they followed the Dickie Rocks and the Brendan Boyers. They still had a huge following. You know,
they did actually. I remember watching the Ballroom of Romance. It's a film.
Yes.
And it's set in a dance hall in Ireland. It's fabulous. Brenda Fricker is in it, actually.
It is.
And that was great, because it gave me a real idea of what it would have been like, you know, to be a young girl in the country, you know, and really there was like at that time, even though it was 1967 and there was women doing amazing things all over the world, really in Ireland, if you lived in rural Ireland, you were going to get married, which was really the best option. You're going to be a nun, or you were
Yes.
going to be, which I'm not saying wasn't another great option. These were the options that seemed to be there. A secretary, or, you know, if you could be a nurse, or if that you were going to work in domestic, you know, be a domestic. But that was it kind of thing, or a teacher. And, you know, really only the very lucky became a nurse or a teacher because they had to go on to get education, but a lot of them didn't, you know, so they ended
Yeah.
up, you know, maybe marriage being the best prospect.
And I think that's where there was a difference between Dublin and
Yes.
rural Ireland, because
Yeah.
there were more options.
Yeah.
Just one or two more options for women.
Yes.
There wouldn't have been much more. And still they were very highly controlled, because you still had to give up your job if you worked in the civil service when you got married.
Which was unbelievable, I think. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
teacher didn't have to do that though.
Yeah.
But, you know, my mother was expected to give up her job.
Yeah.
And very, very, that was really, really difficult, you know, for a lot of women. They're
Dreadful
just
thing,
handing
really.
their
Yeah.
careers over.
Yeah. That was it. You just have to stop. Yeah. Which was really strange, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the loss of talent there was, you know, it was just awful.
Yeah.
Where, just from the point of view now of this book, we've got our launch day, 1st of August. And where do we go from here? Where do you go from here now? You've got this wonderful book that's out. Continue to push it online? Are you required to do much work with the United States? Or, you know, what's the expectation of an author now with a publishing house? Are they expected to do a lot of the work themselves now, or follow the lead of the publishing house specifically?
Yeah, I think it depends on the publishing house totally. Like the publishing house that I'm with, you know, are in business for decades, and a lot of their business is here in Ireland. But they're obviously really looking overseas and stuff like that now. And
1973, wasn't it? That
yeah, you know, they are like I mean, they published Maeve Binchy, Marion Keyes.
Yes.
So you know, they're there a long time, and you know, I feel they
Nicola
definitely
Cassidy
don't.
is another one.
They definitely don't put pressure, but I mean, I think any writer knows today you have to get out there and talk about your book, and you have to build an audience, because even though the world has opened up and it's a bigger market, because now we can sell our books in Japan if we can get in there, you know, or any other country, where decades ago it probably was just Ireland and the UK if we were lucky enough to be in that. But yeah, there's definitely an expectation there, but I think that's across the board with any publishing house now. You know, you need to be able to talk about your book, and you need to be willing to as well. And you know, and I definitely would spend quite a bit of time on social media and different platforms, connecting with people, I suppose, rather than just saying, here's my book, I've written another book. But
Yes.
I also teach, or I don't like to use the word teach, but I facilitate workshops and creative writing and stuff like that. So, you know,
And
that's
that
why,
information is on your website. It's
yeah,
on Sheila's website.
yeah. So that's really, you know, that's a great way for me to connect with people as well. You know, and I've met some fantastic people. There is amazing writers. That's all I can say. You know, I think it's not about who's the best writer that gets the book deal or anything like that. I think it's perseverance, really, very much so. But I know there is fabulous writers out there with writers with their work just in a jotter, and nobody has seen it. And
Do you find that you write differently if you write longhand to when you write on a word processing software program?
I actually gave up writing longhand for the simple reason, which is a really silly reason. I lose things a lot. I'm one of those, I'm quite a scatterbrained person, and I have lists, I have mountains of notebooks, and I could write a whole story and loads of notes, and then I'd have lost the notebook. Couldn't find it, be gone.
Do you
So
have an just having now done, it's 4 books now, so do you find that you've got an ideal length? 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 words,
for the
or
amount
what would
words
your,
wise.
or chapters? Do you like to go
All
to
right.
31 chapters or 32
Okay. Yeah.
chapters? Or
Yeah, I tend to like shorter chapters. I don't like big long chapters. And even when I'm reading a book, so I think you write the way you like to read.
sort of
So
commuter lit?
yeah, so I don't kind of say, oh, there's 1,000 words now, that's a chapter. It's kind of whenever it comes to a natural end. And in
Yes.
some of it, I have a big long chapter and I have a short chapter. I have a fabulous editor, Kay Shortland, and she's magic is the only word I can say, because she takes what you have and somehow she makes that okay. Because I remember worrying about that. Oh, my chapters are, some of them are really long, some of them are really short, and there wasn't a worry about that. That's okay. We don't worry about things like that, you know.
Yes.
And she was right, you know. Some
Yes,
chapters are
because even
longer.
in this particular book,
Yeah,
you've got 1 or 2 chapters about 2/3 of the way in that are a page, maybe a page and a half,
yeah,
and they are simply there to bridge,
yeah,
and but
yeah,
they are necessary to make that bridge,
yeah.
but they're
And
short, and it works.
yeah, it's like dialogue, you know. I think I remember there was one part in it, and I felt like I was reading a play when I was reading it back, and I went, oh my God, you know, but that's the way it was. It was 2 women going, throwing stuff at each other, you know, in this conversation. And I knew that it didn't really need anything else then. So, you know, I think there's no right way to write, which is great. You know, if somebody is writing, there is no formula. You know, you have to just write what you feel is right. And, you
Yes.
know, if you want to write all dialogue or mix in dialogue or short chapters or long chapters or whatever, um, you know, I think that's the brilliant thing about writing. There is no formula, you know. And for me, I don't worry about stuff like that at all. You know, I don't think about that. I don't even
How do
think
you
about
feel
it.
about audiobooks? Do you feel
Oh,
your books would translate well to the audio format?
oh yeah, I would love to. And they are looking at that, which is great. And I do think so, absolutely. And I love it. I especially personally, I love listening to memoir on audio.
Yes.
Um, and I'm listening to Sinead O'Connor at the moment, and it's fantastic. And I've also listened to Gabriel Byrne, you know, the actor.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah,
he's
and he's
brought out
just got this fabulous voice for, like, he's an actor, but he's just like, you know, and he tells his story, and for me as well, because it's that time in Ireland, and it's just like somebody telling me a story, and it's like some, you know, on a one-to-one basis. So I think audio definitely has a place.
just
But it's just hard to find a time to listen to it.
Yeah, just finding the time. I was just about to say, because how
Yeah,
many times I've shoved on a wonderful audiobook late at night, ready to listen to it, and I have left it running, and I have to go back and find,
yeah.
oh, my favorite. Where is it? Where did I stop? When did I fall asleep?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
I
really nice.
find driving is probably the only time, and you know,
Yes,
and it's fabulous then. And if it's just obviously you in the car, and it's fantastic, you just want to drive. Like if the book is good, you're happy to
you
drive
keep
for as long as
driving.
you have to. Yeah, but that's the only time. I did do a bit of painting during COVID, and I listened to it then. That was
Oh,
about
that's a very good.
yeah,
Yes, that's
painting walls
excellent.
now, not art, and I
Yeah,
wasn't even
yeah, but
very good at
both.
that.
It would work for both, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
You get your
yeah.
inspiration, as even as an artist, you would get your inspiration from
Yeah,
something
yeah,
you're listening
yeah.
to.
Well. This was just throwing a bit of paint on a wall. Now would be my kind of limit, and even that was very bad, to be honest. But I did listen to the history of Ireland while I was doing it, so and it was
Oh,
really good. Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah, it
excellent.
was really really good.
What about if you were to offer some advice to people who always wanted to do this? Because what strikes me listening to you again talking about the oppression in Ireland, that's a lot of us will remember. I'm 56, so I remember, starting school with all of these different things that you were mentioning there in the late 60s. But there was, I remember in my primary school system coming up through the late 60s into the mid 70s, this sense of, if it isn't perfect, you don't do it at all. If you can't do it perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. And that would have been something a lot of, primary school kids listened to. Thankfully, a lot of that has disappeared, but it was very much there still in the 70s, And what that ends up doing, I feel, and just, speaking as an ex-teacher as well, is it stays in the heads of the adult, so that when they go to do something, try to write a book, try to produce something that is, in there screaming to get out. This voice goes off in their heads. No, I can't do it, because if I can't do it perfectly, I mustn't do it at all. And it's awful.
Yes.
What would you say to someone out there who's got a story and they want to write, they'd love to be an author, but they're holding themselves back with this?
Okay. I would say to them to pick up their pen and start, and don't wait for the right time. Don't wait for your year off. Don't wait till you retire. Don't wait for anything. Just pick up the pen now and just start writing. If I was to go back and listen to what my teachers would have said about me, I certainly wouldn't have written a book. I think that the English that we learn in school, certainly has a place, but it doesn't have a place when we're trying to write from the heart, and that's where you need to write from. You really need to write what's in here. And like I spoke about how I wrote my first book, that I felt that this was what I should be writing. So if you're doing that, stop and write what you want to write. And sometimes what you want to write is very difficult. It could be something that has troubled you, or something you've been through in life. And listening to so many different ways of how to write, I think just leave that completely and just begin, because nothing will be written if you don't start.
Yes.
And
totally agree.
It's like, if I was to say, I'd love to be an artist, I'd love to start, I'd love a lovely big painting on the wall. I think people don't say that as much about art as they do about writing.
Yes.
Sometimes people talk a lot about what they want to write, but I would say don't. And if you do have an idea for a novel or a story or a memoir or whatever, keep it to yourself. It's like this little secret.
Very good point.
I like a little secret. And the minute you tell somebody, it's like you've broken that little secret with yourself. Yes. And it's amazing, and family are wonderful, but you might say, I'll tell my sister, or I'll tell my auntie, or whatever. And I don't think I'd write it that way now. I think I'd write it a different way. Yeah. And that's normally what you're going to get. Yeah. So, keep that secret to yourself and just write the story. And don't worry about how it's going to get published or where it's going to go or any of that business. Just write the story.
Write the story. Don't worry about the criticism.
No, absolutely not. And, time is this other thing that you constantly hear about. Like my first book, I remember my husband, someone asking him, when did Sheila write the book? And he said, I actually don't know when she wrote it, because I wrote it in little bits here and there, and in the car, yeah. 20 minutes, at the kitchen table for half an hour. And it is difficult to do that. But like, obviously, for the second book, I actually found it more, I found when they'd all go to bed, when everyone was going to bed, I might start to write at 11 o'clock.
Yes.
And then you can kind of go into a zone. Yeah. And no distractions. And I know this sounds crazy, but by 1 or 2 o'clock, you are after being in that zone, and you have written stuff in those few hours that very difficult to write in little pieces. Now, I know you're going to be tired the next day, but if you want to write a book, you're going to have to do these things.
Yes.
I remember reading an interview with Maeve Binchy, and she said that she had bought a book on Princess Diana's butler or something like that. And she said, right, I'm going to write 3 chapters, and then I'm going to treat myself to a glass of wine and a chapter of this new book that she had bought. So I think you have to challenge yourself as well to write it, but I think my advice would be, unless you feel you need help starting, that's different. Then you need a mentor, and then be very careful who you find to mentor you.
Yes, absolutely.
For instance, I got a mentor just for an hour very early on when I was writing. And this particular person told me to take out all the language, all the descriptions that I had in my book and in my piece, and just keep it very, very simple. So I did that, and I showed it to the agent, and she was and I said, I do have a different version, and I showed it to her then, and she said, why didn't you show me this first?
Yes.
So you need to be really, really careful of
asking for too much advice.
The person that is giving you advice, and if you can just write it without anybody's advice, just do that at first, I think.
Yeah, because we're in a culture right now, particularly when it comes to social media, where it's very much the thing to go, oh, I'd love your feedback on this.
Yeah.
Well, there are certain things that you shouldn't do it with, and I would agree with you totally.
Yeah, I think
this is not the
careful, because this is your words, you're spilling out your soul onto the page, and now you're asking, for and everyone's an expert.
Yes,
as well,
and so you've got to be really strong, don't you? You've got to be really strong, stand your ground, find your own niche audience. It's going to take a little while.
Yeah, I think if you can join a group that is very supportive, and like I was lucky enough to do the creative writing with a wonderful woman called Suzanne Power, and she is a mentor, editor, and she was just so supportive. But she was very, the group, we knew what we were either going to say something supportive to the writer, or we wouldn't really say very much. And I think everybody needs that in the beginning, because one word, I mean, if I remember writing a piece, and it was quite flowery, there was loads of descriptions, and there was a man in the group, and he said, I feel like I'm reading a brochure from a house, or an estate agent's, because I had just described this house, obviously it needed a bit of editing and whatever, but I remember being really upset. Oh my God, he thinks I should be writing for an estate agent. I want to write a novel, so you can take those things to heart. So
but then they may not be coming from the right place either with their criticism. I've learned as well that men and women very often will read, and their expectations when they buy a novel can be quite different. Now you've got to give it time. They usually will marry up with each other.
Yeah.
But you have to acknowledge that too, that very often men won't be looking for the same things that as women will. And I'm not just talking about subject matter.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about, chick flicks and what. I'm not talking about either on the visual, on the screen, or in the novel format. They generally do look for more concise pieces of information.
Yes.
And they look for it to be delivered in a different way. So you can't take what one individual, be they male or female, say as being the reason why you've got to go and rework and everything. As you said before, there will be certain things. Like, for example, I remember when I wrote my memoir, Tehran Calling, and I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record the chapters now. I'm going to try and do an audiobook with it. I did something unexpected in that, because my chapters were super short, and I realized I was time leaping from different so regularly. I suddenly realized, do you know what? My book does not suit the audio format. It absolutely suits the written format, but it doesn't translate very well to the audio, because I am jumping so frequently from, the past to the present and in short chapters, that it would be quite difficult for a listener to keep track. And it was a little lesson that I learned about myself. Now, I could have taken that very badly if it came from somebody else, I could have done. So there'll always be certain things, I suppose, that they say that are true. I mean, sometimes you'll find someone who is writing and they're using an excessive amount of pronouns, or they're repeating the same pronouns over and over and over again. And that can sometimes be a distraction.
Yeah.
So little things like that you can guide someone on, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and
it has to be them.
Yeah, and I think people get very kind of caught up in the word, the nouns and the vowels and and the adjectives and worrying about all that.
The semantics.
For instance, I was in a little group recently, and it was just before COVID, actually, in the middle of lockdown, when we were allowed out again, and we had a little class that we actually were able to meet. And there was this woman, and she had told me she had never got any chance at education or anything like that, but she had a story to tell. And I said, well, just write a little bit of it. And everybody had written a little bit of a story. Now, when she read her story, this woman who had no education, she didn't know what an adjective was or anything like that. She just wrote it from her heart. And when I say there wasn't a dry eye in the room, and it wasn't just the content, it was because of her authentic voice.
Yes.
She transferred it to the page, and it was just one of the most beautifully pieces I had heard within the class, and of many classes. And
that's what you're looking for.
And I think that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for somebody who was good, who necessarily good at English in school. I think it's somebody who is willing to go deep enough that they find, their authentic. You hear authentic, but your authentic voice, that we only have one. We only have this one voice, but it's ours and nobody else has it. It's our thoughts. Our experiences, I do believe we carry the stories of our own ancestors as well, and they're all here in our DNA, but they're unique to us, and we have to write that story, or that, and whether it's a memoir or a piece of fiction or poetry or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's all just writing, but it's all it's coming from the soul almost, and I think until you do that, you'll possibly struggle a little bit as a writer, because you're trying to write as a formula, or you're writing unconsciously like somebody else. But why would we do that? We are our own, we must find our own voice. And I think that when a writer does that, even if they're only starting out, they're really onto something then, and
absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, there's no pattern, or there's no I remember, absolutely reading loads of blogs. Oh, if you want to get a book published, it should be about this, or it should be this, or it should be like that. Obviously now I know I wasted all that time, because
and we see it all over social media at the moment, don't we? 10 ways to guarantee success in writing.
Absolutely not. And even if your story has been told 100 times or 1,000 times, if you feel, oh, well, that story has been told, or my story is no different, it is different. It is different. And the simplest of a story as well can be really beautiful. I think it's just that honesty that comes onto the page, and that's what hooks us.
And the plausibility.
Yes.
I mean, we look at different genres. Fiction is fiction, but you make it plausible.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it has to be a little bit, doesn't it? It has to be. I mean, things happen that we know in real life that if you wrote it in a book, they'd say, well,
you couldn't write that.
That's not believable. Things have happened. But so it does have to have some sort of plausibility that this, that the reader, I suppose, will believe you that this is what happens. And I talk about it as that it really has happened. And I think you have to kind of, in fiction, you have to really believe that. And you get to a certain space where you do start believing that. That
It's like what they say, isn't it? You know, the secret of a really good lie is one that's based on truth.
Yeah.
There has to be an element of truth in the lie for the lie to work. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, but yeah, anybody who's writing, you know, there is something about writing as well. It's not like if you decide to do a course in jewelry making, we'll say, or anything, weaving or whatever. It's a nice thing to do, and hope, you know, who knows where it will lead. But I think if somebody begins to write and they consistently write, it changes you, because it changes your way of thinking. It changes your life. I'm not really sure how, to be honest, but it does change it for the better, and it gives you a different sense of the world, and it definitely helps you make sense. Not that I can ever make sense of the world a lot of the time, but it gives you somewhere to go with all this stuff in your head. And I know that's journaling as well, but it doesn't really matter what it's called. It could be a novel you write, and it's all this stuff going on in your head, and it goes into a novel, you know. But it's somewhere to kind of not really just kind of get rid of it or anything, but maybe to try to understand, well, why was that person so awful? Or, you know, and then if you go back through the layers, you know, not that you can ever forgive someone for being awful or anything like that, but you start to understand the characters, and everybody has a story, I suppose, and it's a way of dealing with life as well, I think, writing. So I think if you start, you won't regret it. But you do need to consistently do it. You know, if you start a story, I think, and you leave it and then you come back, you're kind of at day one again, because you're not in the zone at all. So even if you only visit the writing every day for a couple of minutes, it's kind of unconsciously in your head. So if you are writing, which I hope anyone that does want to write will write, consistency is a huge part of it. You know, you need to do even a little bit every day to keep the story in your head for it to evolve.
Yeah, and if they reach a point where every story will eventually have a turn, and they're stuck, and panic can often set in for novice writers when that happens. Still keep writing every day, even if it's on something totally different.
Yeah,
keep writing.
I think so. And I think I remember when I wrote my first book, I remember speaking to John McKenna, who was he's a writer and a teacher as well, and he was part of the classes I was doing. He was tutoring, and I said, I have 30,000 written, but I'm not really sure if it's any good, but I have a fantastic idea for a different book. And he let me talk all that, you know, and tell him everything. And he said, now, Sheila, you know that brilliant idea you have for the other book? He said, write yourself an email and tell yourself all about it and keep it. But that's where it's staying now. Now go back to the other book, because he said if every writer stopped when they feel the panic or they feel it's no good or whatever, he said there'd be nothing written, because everybody feels like that. Like, even now you're writing script and you go, oh my God, this is crap. Like, what am I doing? Like, you know, but, you know, I think at stages everybody does that, and you just have to struggle on, you know, struggle on and struggle on. And, it, you know, I say struggle because writing, you know, I think people have an idea as well. And you know yourself from writing, like, it can be hard, like, you know, there's wonderful parts to it, and it's a wonderful place to go to and to escape to. But, you know, it's like everything. Like, if I decide I want to be a marathon runner, I can't just go out and run a marathon. Like, I have to do the hard work and the practice and the that.
And the eureka moment will come.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you'll know. And then I can do the marathon and I'll be delighted. I'll never do a marathon because I don't run. But you know, I think, you know, if you're struggling with writing, as we will all at some stage, you know, it's just part of it. You know, I think you just have to keep going, and, you know, and and next day will be better.
And
And the
next day
next
will be
day.
better. And
Yeah.
ignore what a lot of what a lot of so-called experts say to you. Ignore a lot of
Yeah,
it.
well,
Just
when I
experience
say,
tells you that,
yeah,
doesn't it?
I feel family and friends can be kind of, and they mean best, like, but they always I found that in the very beginning, and I find that people say to me, oh yeah, I was telling my sister, and she just thinks the whole idea is whatever. And actually, I go back to Suzanne Power, because I remember telling her something like that when I had this idea. And I said, somebody had said to me that they didn't really think that the idea I had was that great, and that if I did something else and whatever. And she said, I tell you what you'll do now. She said, you tell them to go off and write their own bloody book.
Yeah.
Completely ignore what they've said,
Yeah.
and I have thought about that at times, because you have to believe that seed, that thought, is right at the beginning, even
Yes.
though you'll doubt it at times. I think you have to just keep continuing, and
and just absolutely, I agree with you. And shut off from them, because in the end, they don't have the input into the project that you think. They're not your audience unless they particularly love reading and they love reading your books. Then they are your audience, but they're not actually the people who actually count. You start, don't you, when you've got a few books behind you, you start to suddenly see the light. You start to realize, okay, I actually do know what I'm doing now, and I know this is going to be a real adventure. And I want to go on this adventure.
Yes, totally. And I mean, I think that's the wonderful part about writing. You can go anywhere with it, and you can write anything. Nobody's going to, you can go in a different direction. Like, I don't really believe in being put in a box. Like, I love historical fiction, and I'm going to continue writing it. But I wouldn't like to think, oh my God, I can never write anything else. If I want to write, a contemporary book, or I want to write a non-fiction book, I want to do that, because I think creatively you have to do what you want to do.
Yes.
And I think it's like everything. I definitely feel I'm a better writer than I was when I started. I know I am. Yes. But yet when I read pieces, I can see where the honesty kicked in. And that's where, and that when I say honesty, that rawness almost, where I wasn't thinking about what I should write or anything else. I was just writing from as deep as I could go. And that, and that grain is there throughout. And I think when you are writing, just strip away the layers and write, if that makes sense.
From the point of view of now, I want to stay the right side of this, because this is not to go too deeply into this. But when an author then gets a contract with a publishing house, is there the threat of, let's say it's a 3-book deal or something like that? Does that become a pressure? Is there any advice that you can offer people when it comes to when they've actually got the deal and now they've got to deliver on that? Should they just relax and continue as normal?
Yeah, like, I mean, a lot of every publishing house is different, but for what I write is commercial fiction. It is books that are hopefully will sell quite a lot of. So that's why it's historical fiction, but it would be in the genre of commercial as well. That it is. So the idea is that you write a book a year. I think people are different. I love having a deadline, because I know then I have to have the book for a certain time. Or I think if I didn't have a deadline, I could just, hang around there and I could never have the book written, or it would take a lot longer. But at the end of the day, like, they're all just people. Like, there's nobody kind of, down your neck saying you have to have this, you have to have that. Like, definitely with my last book, like, I remember going, oh, I haven't got ready on time, I'm going to need another little bit of time. And everybody is very nice about stuff like that. And I think I was just so glad to get a book deal that I was,
Yes, it's
you know,
wonderful.
I probably was worried first. Oh my God, has she made a mistake? Like, has she read it? You know, and
She's actually offering me a book deal, but you were that good. And
yeah.
surely it must be a great moment though when a publishing house says, basically is offering you that deal because they
Oh,
recognize you are that good.
oh my God. Yeah, I still have the email from my agent, and and the heading was, "Are you sitting down?" You know, and I remember I had a particularly bad day that day. It was in summer, and I came in and I just read the email and I just broke down crying. I couldn't believe it. I went, oh my
Oh, it's
God, you
wonderful.
know, because I had thought about it for ages and I just didn't know if it was going to happen, you know,
Yeah.
and there was talk that it might and it might and it might and might, and then it's just, I remember, like, you'd be checking your email going, oh my God, I wonder, is there any news? Is there any news? And then the email came in and I was like, oh my God, you know, and that was the other thing I found, that when I started off, oh, it's impossible to get a book deal. Oh, it's really difficult to get a book deal, like, you know, and I know lots of people who've got book deals, like, you know, it's not,
Yeah.
yes, it's difficult, but there's so many agents out there. I mean, you can send I have an American agent. There's agents all over the world, like today. You know,
Yeah.
there's a huge amount in the UK that represent Irish writers. There's a huge amount in America. And, you know, there's loads of publishing houses. Like, there is loads. And there's lots of people getting book deals. I remember that was one thing when I started out, that I felt that I was hearing from maybe people as well that were published, you know, it's just extremely difficult to get a publishing deal,
Yeah.
you know, and I know it was easy for you to say now you have one, but I have heard of quite a lot of other people getting them as well, and we all did
Yes.
believe we'd get them. But that's
Yes.
where I think perseverance is part of it. And it is hard, you know, it is hard waiting, because you feel like you're not in control of your life anymore. You're waiting for somebody. And the publishing world is noted for kind of taking its time on everything, you know.
It
So
does take its time. And I think I think as well, and I would have felt this too. I was probably a little bit worried about losing control of my baby.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the books are your babies. And
yes.
you don't want to lose control. I think for some people that's a big thing, and for other people it's not.
Yeah, I think when I'm writing it, I'm almost like, for the lake house. I felt I was almost there, a silent guest in the house.
Yes.
And I think once it's published, it's like it's not mine anymore now. It's out in the world.
Yes.
But that's a good thing, you know.
Yes.
And I've suddenly disappeared from it. I think that's a weird thing maybe to say, but it's like I'm this silent witness to it all, and
Yes.
all of a sudden now I'm not part of it now. You know,
Yeah.
that's the story now, and I'm not actually there now. But I felt very much present when I was writing it. Where now, of course, I'm writing another book, so I'm kind of, you know, and that's how it works for me, you know. So I'm very much so, but it's lovely to kind of go back and kind of, you know, even though it seems like, you know, not a long time, but a year is a long time of writing, you know. So
Yes.
I'm kind of in another zone now, I suppose, with another piece of writing.
And is can you tell us anything about that at all? Is it in the same
Yeah,
time period?
yeah. I love that time period. I really do, and I'm staying with it. But this time is slightly, you know, it is a new thing for me, and I'm nervous about that because I've never done this before. I'm actually it's inspired by a real person, an actual, and it's not that it's her story, but definitely part of her story is in it. And I can't say who it is at the moment, but
It's
she
a
was,
responsibility.
yeah, it's huge responsibility,
Mm.
and I feel like I'm writing it in the same format, as in it's a time slip novel. So it is a novel. So the past will be very much her story and the present is fiction. So it's somebody kind of trying to kind of look a little bit for her story, I suppose. And I first came across her a few years ago, and I became quite fascinated with her. And again, she was somebody who I felt was forgotten by Irish society and who shouldn't have been. So I can't really say any more than that at the moment.
This
But
will be real. This will be fun.
Yeah, I'm doing lots of research on it at the
This will be
moment.
wonderful. I can't wait for the next one now.
But
Do
again,
you think that there's a do you really think there's truth in the fact that the Irish are storytellers? And that
I think it's in our DNA. I think it is. I mean, I don't know how far back it goes, but I think there's so many stories have been told through the decades and the generations and the centuries. It's almost in our blood, isn't it? It's like Catholicism. Whether you're religious or you're not, I think if you were brought up in Ireland, the Ireland that I was brought up in, we and whatever you believe today, whether you're a devout Catholic or whether you have completely abandoned it, it's almost in our bones because it was part of who we were when we were brought up. So there's beliefs. It's like the stories of the Banshee. Of course we may not believe that, but we know the story of the Banshee because it was part of it was part of my DNA anyway, because it was told to me loads of times.
And you know why they exist as stories.
Yeah, so all those legends and stories and the children of Lear and all that kind of thing definitely influenced me. And I feel that, anybody who has been brought up in Ireland, or even if you haven't, but if you have Irish connections and you have Irish people connected to you, I mean,
the philosophy, it's in your bones. Yeah,
it's in our bones, it's in our blood. We can't help it. We can't help but tell stories, I think, and some people may be more kind of practiced at telling stories. But I think everybody can tell stories in Ireland. I really do. I think they're unlike other countries. Not that I have travelled hugely or anything like that, but yeah, there's definitely something there, I think.
There's definitely something there. And I think a lot of it has to do with the Celtic mindset. I was talking to a gentleman, I interviewed him there last month, and his name is Anthony Murphy. He runs Mythical Ireland. And he was pointing out that, although the mythologies and the stories around Ireland, although a lot of them might contradict each other, they are there for a reason. They represent something. And even if a lot of it isn't true, there'll always be something in one of the stories that is fundamentally true.
Okay.
And that's why looking at those mythological tales and going right back through the mythology is so important, because there'll always be something in one of the stories that is absolutely the truth, and that never gets lost in translation through the generations.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
It's the storytelling aspect of our history. I think it never leaves us. And then sometimes you'll meet people that you don't think are going to be storytellers. You put a pen in their hand and they blow you away. I don't know how many times as a teacher I found that was the case. You'd have the kid in the room who never said very much, maybe wasn't particularly articulate, and the essay they would submit was just, you're looking at the name and saying, this can't be right. This is somebody passing off something that is off the internet or something. And it wasn't. It was their work, but it was all in there, locked in,
Yeah.
It's just, it's wonderful. People surprise you. And
they really do. They really do. And young people as well, and children, as you say, they're and I think it's that rawness that's there as well, isn't it? Because maybe they don't feel the pressure of having to put something on the page that's monitored or whatever. So they just put their truth basically on the page, and that rawness is what makes it really so beautiful, I think, as well.
Yes, but, they haven't talked it out to the point that they've made it stale.
Yeah.
It's still in there. When it does finally come out, it comes out exactly the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sheila Forsey, thank you very much for being on the show today. So, The Lake House at Lenashee, it is published today, 1st of August, 2021. It's a wonderful read. historical fiction, wonderful characters in it. It gives you real insight, if you're outside the country, into the Ireland of the time, and you have captured it beautifully. Congratulations on a wonderful book. I so enjoyed it. And I always make a point on Writer's Block of actually reading the book cover to cover with any of the guests that I have on, and I can't wait to get into your other 2 books. It'll just be fantastic. This is a wonderful read, and I highly recommend it to people. It is so relaxing, so different, very unexpected ending, but totally plausible. You'll enjoy it
so much. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like I've just been talking to a good friend about stuff now, so it was really lovely to talk to you.
Well, actually, I feel the same way, and it was great. Thank you so much for sparing the time to come on.
No,
in the next couple of days, it's going to be busy for you now.
It was really lovely. And actually, one thing I forgot to say, somebody just asked me today, Lenashee is from My Lag and Love. So it's this, you know, the
song,
word,
which you mention in the book so many times. I used to sing it as a Bunratty Castle entertainer.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah.
I know. And it's funny because, you know, Bunratty Castle was made famous by the Kennedys and, you know, Tip O'Neill, the leader of the House of Representatives, and all these different politicians coming across in the 60s.
Right.
And so bringing, you know, America with them to the west of Ireland and bringing in this incredible connection, which of course Bunratty then went on to be the oldest banqueting centre in the world, which it is. Yes, so it's amazing, but kind of the world was coming to you. And it's a whole other, you know, the stories are incredible too. So and
thank you so much, Miriam.
No, I'm absolutely delighted you came on, and thank you so much for looking at this area of Irish history too, because it is so fascinating.
It is, it really is. And it's, you know, and what I love about it, as I'll let you go then, is people can still talk about it. It's within living memory, isn't it? There's so many people can still talk about it, and I kind of like that, you know, you can really get the authentic opinion about what it was really like.
Exactly, you sure can. Everybody, listen, this was a wonderful interview. I was so delighted to have Sheila Forsey on the show today. And we look forward to many guests and then over the next part of the summer. I hope that all of you have remained well during the pandemic, and please subscribe, please hit that bell, please subscribe to the channel. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.